Not happy at all. The British market's down about 3%. The French and Germans over 4%. This is on top of an average of about 3% yesterday. So we're looking at losses of around 7, perhaps 8% over the last 2 days, and that really does express this uncertainty. And
European Union is begging the United States for help. It's going hand in hand to the U.S.-led International Monetary Fund, begging for money to bail out failing Eurozone countries such as Italy, Spain, and Greece. The IMF provides funding. The American taxpayer will pay the price, since almost 1/3 of the IMF's budget comes from the U.S.
It's pretty likely they are going to turn it down, aren't they, and say no. If they do, what are the implications?
Well, if we get as far as a referendum, there are a number of steps that he has to get through first, that this government has to get through first, not least of which is a confidence vote on Friday. The opposition, or at least the principal opposition party there, is demanding new elections rather than a referendum. So it's no guarantee that the referendum will take place. If they do get a no vote, which does at this point in time seem, frankly, pretty likely, then the potential for all hell breaking loose is quite immense. Greece would be in a position of most likely having to default on its debt, and also most likely having to exit the euro, in some disarray for the other euro countries, but perhaps this gives the opportunity for Greece to rebuild its economy, which has been shattered by continued euro membership and continued austerity programs, and perhaps gives the opportunity for the Greek people to sort themselves out and begin to, take some control back over their own economy and society.
You mean to say Greece could exit the euro? Wouldn't this set off a domino effect and completely undermine the whole idea of the eurozone? This would be a disaster, wouldn't it, for the eurozone, or not?
It depends on whose point of view you take in these things. I think what we've seen over the last probably 2 years now, as the crisis has unfolded, is an awful lot of the very deep underlying structural problems in the euro. The fact there's a bunch of pretty dissimilar economies lashed together with a single currency, a single monetary system. That has started to expose, the crisis has started to expose some of those structural problems. And what we're seeing at the moment is, I think, something approaching the end game for those structural problems. At the very least, we might well anticipate quite a fundamental reordering of how the euro operates out of all this. Now, there is an argument out there that this should mean greater fiscal union, this should mean greater monitoring of how European governments choose to spend their money and choose to raise taxes. That's one possible outcome of it. Given the disorder that's actually taking place, and given what's just taking place or potentially taking place in Greece with the referendum, perhaps the more likely thing is a steady disintegration of the euro. All of these are of course, possibilities at the moment.
Well, talking about that,
much could change in the next few weeks.
Yes, talking about that referendum in Greece, it's interesting that, of course, many believe that the bankers and the politicians are to blame for the Greek financial troubles. But maybe this is a clever way of giving the people a say, and in that respect, it's an attempt to pass the blame on to the people's will on what the outcome is going to be.
What we're really talking about here is that, look, the Greek debt is unpayable. There is no real chance of Greece ever repaying the colossal mountain of sovereign debt that has built up there in the course of the crisis. It has to default at some point. What we're looking at the moment is really a kind of a process by which that default might be enacted. It may take place under the guise of the IMF and the EU deal that was struck last week, or it may take place at the behest, essentially, of the Greek people, something like Argentina in late 2001, where they simply decide that they're not going to pay the debt, they can't pay the debt, and therefore they won't pay the debt. Now, the potential for lots and lots of other events, for wider banking crises and the rest of it, arising from either of these two situations is very substantial. So I think we're reaching the end of one kind of phase of the crisis inside the Eurozone, and perhaps the opening of another one.
So let me get this straight. Greece, Italy, Portugal, Ireland, Spain are bankrupt or on the verge of bankruptcy. They want to look to the International Monetary Fund, 1/3 of whose coffers are filled by the United States government. The United States government is nearly $16 trillion itself in debt. What kind of sense does that make?
Well, I'm pleased we're having this debate, because I've been amazed over the last few weeks. There's been a wall of silence from America. No one's been saying anything. I mean, with respect, I would say that your president is handling your own public finances pretty badly. How on earth can you want to get involved with tens and tens and tens of billions of dollars more, helping not to bail out Greece and Portugal and Ireland, but to keep them imprisoned inside a currency that they should never have joined in the first place? All you guys are doing, and all we guys are doing, is we're pouring good money after bad. It's going bust. Of that, there's no doubt at all.
What will happen if some miracle occurs and the U.S. says no, and Angela Merkel says no, and David Cameron says no, and Nicolas Sarkozy says no, and these countries are permitted to collapse?
Well, I couldn't agree more. Let's take the pain. I mean, look, back in 2008, when these big banking crises hit, and much of it because of the stupidity of what American and European politicians did with the banks, but think about Iceland. Iceland just simply could not muster the reserves or the political will to bail out the banks. They let the banks go bankrupt. The Icelandic currency fell by 80%. Interest rates went to 20%. You know, it wasn't just the volcanic ash that year that made things look grim in Iceland. But where's Iceland today? Well, Iceland today is getting back to growth. She's taken the hit, she's taken the bad news, and she's recovering. Take Greece. We're keeping Greece trapped inside a currency. Her currency probably should be 65 to 70% lower than it is.
Wow.
You know, most of her banks need to go bust. And the risk is this, that we can talk about economics until the cows come home. But the reality is, if you strip a country of its democracy, if you take away from it the ability of your own elected government to do things, be they good or bad things, and you turn it over to 3 foreign bureaucrats, one from the IMF, one from the European Commission, one from the European Central Bank. Once a fortnight, they land in Athens airport and they tell the Prime Minister what he can and can't do. I put it to you that if you rob people of their ability to determine their own futures, they will turn to violence. And I believe that what will happen in Greece before too long is there will be a revolution.
Wow.
That is just how serious and how stupid this whole thing is.
And of course all the security precautions, indicate just how little legitimacy this group really has. It shouldn't be the case that the world's leaders have to meet behind great big steel fences with the police out and all the rest of it if they enjoyed the legitimacy of the people they claim to represent. So yes, there is a huge amount of pressure on them, and there is also, I think, the potential for change.
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.